From businesses in Devon's perspective, is it just about these layers of government and policies delivering local public goods like better travel and infrastructure, or is it really about helping businesses to grow and employ people? How do they see it working there?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting the accredited chambers to give evidence of this subcommittee, as we are the voice of business of all sizes. And I would stress we're apolitical, so anything I say is not a dig at any particular party. We work with everyone. I have to say that for most businesses, a lot of what you're talking about would sound, and I mean this with greatest respect, sound empty words. What does levelling up mean? They don't know. The Southwest feels it's hugely overlooked. We frankly are fed up of hearing about the Northern Powerhouse and the Midlands Engine. We think about, well, what about the Southwest? Our motorway ends at Exeter. You've still got 2 hours in my region before you reach the other end of my region. So that transport infrastructure is terrible. Long publicised talk about the Dawlish railway line, where the slightest hint of a storm and trains stop. That also goes past Holden Hill, which is where the A30 and the A38 that split from the M5 carry on into the southwest. If you get a weather bomb at Holden Hill, which happens every couple of years, the whole of the southwest is cut off. Plymouth has lost its airport. Exeter is in danger of losing it if it doesn't have a significant investment. Digital infrastructure is very good in the southwest, but there are significant pockets where it isn't, certainly in terms of broadband and mobile connectivity. And I think there needs to be a thought about joining up these strategies. There is a huge connectivity between business, income, health, skills and education, and not one thing is going to join it. And I completely agreed with your panelists from the last session, Susan, who talked about we shouldn't be competing for this, it's what regions need. If you look at the southwest, where 23% of 18-year-olds go to university, that compares to 45% in London. So that has a knock-on effect to our ability to be productive. The infrastructure has a knock-on effect on our ability to be productive. If you haven't got good physical connectivity and digital connectivity, it's very hard as a business to be effective, and therefore that affects earnings. So earnings here are more than 12% lower than they are across the UK average. So levelling up, what does it really mean? I would say it means equality of investment, but actually I don't think it does. It means equality of opportunity for all businesses. And so when I heard from your previous panelists talking about, well, if you invest here, we'll give you £10 back for every pound you put in. Well, that's very, very all well and good, but you've got to start somewhere. Highly effective regions can always turn money round into a greater return. But if you can't get to your nearest town or city, if the infrastructure is poor, then really it doesn't mean anything. So you need to actually probably flip that on its head and say, let's start with the places where they need that. Otherwise, you're driving a bigger gap than you've already got. And when I hear about the north-south divide, I don't say this lightly. I think that there's an east-west divide. The southwest feels completely forgotten. On a political map, it's largely blue. There's 2 pinpricks of red, and I think we've been taken for granted, frankly.
Just touch back on something that Stuart said earlier, just to give him a bit of a reassurance. Actually, I mean, I'm from my constituency is in Durham, and we're right in the northern powerhouse. But I can actually get to London as quick as I can get to Manchester. So we've got challenges getting the northern powerhouse to ourselves on that. I think really the agenda from me and colleagues is as much about the distance from the London centre as it is. I talked to people from Devon and all over there that we empathise with you. Don't worry. But in terms of this, I want to go back to a question that I asked in the other panel earlier, which I'm sure you possibly were listening to, which is really about who should be leading the levelling up agenda? Is it the LEPs? Is it the government? Who puts the strategy in place that's going to move this forward? Where does it come from? And I'd just like to hear your context on the same question. If reference Stuart, we might as well start there.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate that every region has its issues. I would say that the southwest is going to be absolutely decimated by COVID through the hospitality, leisure, and tourism industry and the connectivity of the supply chains to that, which is going to put us on the back foot to start with. You talk about the connectivity. I know everyone wants better connectivity. Everyone wants better infrastructure. I want to give you an example. My last firm, I worked for a firm of lawyers. I was a director of operations there. We went out to recruit a commercial lawyer of a certain level. We had to go headhunting nationwide. And of the 5 lawyers that said they were interested, every single one, when we said, where's the job? And we said, Plymouth, they said, no, too far, too disconnected. And that is a real world example of how difficult it is to attract talent down here if the infrastructure isn't here. I think the COVID situation has actually enabled the public and private sector to work better together than it ever has. I now sit on various recovery panels with the LEP, with the County Council and with the City Council in Plymouth. And I think those are fantastic opportunities. I hear there's a lot of talk about elected mayors. Business can't have an influence on that. We feel we kind of get left out because we haven't got an elected mayor. We haven't got a high profile person. We haven't got an Andy Burnham. We haven't got someone fighting our cause. And there's a lot of regional incoherence down here. We've got the Great Southwest Initiative that almost nobody's heard of, which is our powerhouse. And then suddenly the Western Gateway's announced. I wasn't even asked about it. I was told I could join it. But when I asked what it was basically about linking South Wales with Bristol. So it has no relevance to me at all. So this regional incoherence is terrible. And generally, I work very well with my LEP, but I think most businesses would say, what's a LEP? What does it do? What does it deliver? And so who should run that? I think there's a danger, I'm sorry, I will end shortly, I know time's short, there's a danger of LEPs turning into delivery organisations, which I don't think they are. And I think we need to join together the business support organisations, chambers of commerce, with public sector, with private sector in a meaningful way. The local industrial strategy, I largely support it, but it was more by coincidence. We weren't consulted with, local business, as far as I know, weren't consulted with. However, it speaks very highly to the strengths of the Southwest, to the blue-green economy, to sustainable energy production, things that we can do very well here. We've got world-class marine facilities, world-class marine research. If that was given proper government backing, we could do really, really well with that. And that is the future. The future isn't in burning fossil fuels and so forth, but we can really lead that way in the Southwest. And of course, I would say this, that the Southwest is a fantastic place to do business. I'm sure most of the people on this call would be very jealous that 10 minutes after I finish work, I can be on a beach or on Dartmoor. And in fact, there's a business on Exmoor that if you ring them on a Friday, it says, sorry, we're all surfing. And in fact, they do research work for NASA. So there's you know, if COVID has shown something, there are places you want to be when you set your business up and places you don't. And the Southwest is a fantastic place to do business. I would just say, you know, with the right investment, regions can do really well, but we need that investment in the things we're good at. Upskilling, massively important. Something government could do as a swift and helpful intervention would be to extend the annual investment allowance to training, education and skills, so that it becomes very cost effective for business to invest in that, and it takes some of the cost of business away. Just make that little point.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And obviously the Prime Minister gave a speech the other day about his skills agenda. So no doubt the department will be listening. So your plea has been heard. I'm imagining you think we could be better at involving businesses in delivering the industrial strategy and its output.
Definitely, and I'd agree with Sandy completely that there's this sort of rather rush for small pots of money. Great initiatives, but government initiatives and interventions on their own don't make a strategy. We could do with this being much more long-term, much more joined up, making sure that this all works. I'm afraid in my county, Devon, to use your expression, it would be seen as a Brucey bonus, but one that's never going to come our way. It's going to go to the borrowed votes in the north. It's going to go to HS2. It's going to go somewhere else. And the larger businesses get it, but a lot of the smaller businesses, I think, are, I wouldn't go as far as to say apathetic, but even worse, I think they're completely disillusioned with levelling up, with the amount of equality.
How does a clustered R&D investment support local economic growth? And how can we actually agree priorities across the various regions? We've already heard that there's quite different conversations going on between the southwest and the north. So how can we actually get you all talking and cluster R&D?
This actually came from Exeter University, who I just happened to be speaking to and mentioned that I would be here. And they've said there's a challenge about, and forgive me sort of reading this out, but I want to get it right because it's not my skill set, but they said there's a challenge about lots of parts of the innovation and enterprise ecosystem in place that need to be more joined up, more accessible, with gaps plugged, and activities scaled up to support more of the business to start up. And the aim is to leverage all those existing assets to deliver effective support. And they're talking about creating what they call a Southwest Technopole, which is bringing together the science parks, the impact lab, the innovation centres, business support organisations, and virtual membership available to all, regardless of location. I won't go into full details, but you're absolutely right that they were evidencing a lack of connectivity and joined upness about all that research and innovation. And I think there's something that could be done there to pull those together. And it sounds to me, from what little I've read in this, that a Southwest Technopole would be a really good way of doing it. So areas like Cornwall had a significant degree of European funding. They are feeling very, very vulnerable that the shared prosperity funds are just going to go and be used in I won't say again the expression I used earlier, but be used in a political way rather than to truly replace European funding when it's withdrawn.
And on that sort of political way, how would you make sure that it wasn't done in a political way?
Well, equality of the amount of sort of investment, the amount of funds that were dealt out by the European funds. But if you see a sudden shift from one place to another, I would say that's probably more political than it is, because as Louis said, I mean, it's a system that was working and did a lot of good. So let's carry on with that.
I've got a final question before we wrap up from Mark Pawsey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to miss part of the session. But in the first session, we heard about the important role of LEPs in delivering the levelling up agenda. And LEPs, we know, are a combination of business interests and local authorities coming together. The witnesses we have in front of us now are very much the voice of business. So what I just wanted to explore was whether or not you're always listened to by your LEPs. Do LEPs have a sufficient regard for the voice of business, and are your priorities aligned? Are there some instances where your priorities representing business may differ from that being promoted by the LEP?
In the situation in my lab is improving, and they do use the quarterly economic survey. They do want data from us. I completely agree that often it's about pots of funding that doesn't quite match up with what business needs. I would say one thing I've taken away from this whole discussion is that there is a lack of joined up connectivity, of communication rather, in terms of the various bodies. I would like to see national, regional, local government working much more closely with LEPs and chambers to ensure that there is a joined up approach to this sort of thing. So whilst I'm not critical of our LEP, and they have started to consult with us, they have started to use information, I'd say it isn't a truly joined up approach, and I think more could be done to ensure that it is.